All right, today we're going to dive into a really powerful and honestly a pretty unsettling idea for understanding the crisis in the West. It's called the Epstein Mirror.
And this quote, wow, it really just cuts right to the heart of the whole argument, doesn't it? The idea here is that the biggest threat we face isn't some enemy at the gates. No, it's an internal rot, a decay that starts the moment a society's leaders decide that their own comfort is more important than their convictions.
So that brings us to this central metaphor, the Epstein Mirror. The thinking here is that the whole Jeffrey Epstein scandal, it's not just some isolated, sordid crime story. Not at all. It's presented as a mirror. And when we're forced to look into that mirror, what we see reflected back is something much, much deeper. A sickness, really, at the very foundations of our civilization.
And I want to be super clear about this. This framework isn't about diving into conspiracy theories. It's more like a symbolic way of understanding what happens when things are allowed to fester in the shadows. You can think of it like an X-ray, you know? It shows us the stuff we can't normally see, the hidden dependencies, that paralyzing fear of being exposed, and the corrosive double standards that have been growing inside our most important institutions.
So you gotta ask, how did we even get to this point? For a long, long time, the West's strength was seen as its armor, this kind of social contract built on big ideas like the rule of law and moral responsibility. But the argument we're looking at today says that a critical vulnerability has appeared, a crack in that armor.
And this is where it gets really interesting, how this idea is visualized. You see on one side, you have the principles that supposedly built the West: duty, law, honor, the armor, right? But on the other side, you see what's replacing them: pleasure, comfort, and just reputation. Not actual honor, but just the appearance of a good reputation. And the argument is, when an entire elite class starts prioritizing its own comfort over its public duty, well, that's when the foundation itself starts to crumble.
You know, there's actually a name for this in political science. It's called the principal-agent problem. Sounds complicated, but it's pretty simple. Think of it like this. We, society, are the principal. We hire agents, our leaders, to do a job for all of us. The problem kicks in when those agents stop working for us and start working for themselves. And when that happens, the whole system gets captured. The institutions aren't there for the people anymore. They're just there to protect a network of insiders.
And, of course, a weakness like that doesn't go unnoticed, not for a second. Adversaries see those cracks, and they think, why bother with a huge, expensive, direct attack on the fortress? There's a much easier way in. They don't need to storm the gates when they can just quietly buy the keys from the people guarding them.
And this isn't some kind of dark magic. It's a cold, almost technological process. A playbook, really. Step 1, you identify a weakness. Could be greed, ego, some private vice. Step 2, you create what's called a managed risk, maybe a secret party, an off-the-books favor. Step 3, and this is crucial, you document the compromise. That's your leverage. Step 4, you solidify that dependency until the person is so tangled up they're too afraid to get out. And then the final step, you convert that private fear into political action. Suddenly, they're blocking sanctions, delaying aid, or just echoing an adversary's talking points. Their private shame has just been turned into a weapon of public policy.
So, all of this leads to a pretty chilling question, doesn't it? Is this how empires fall? Is this pattern something new? Or are we just watching a story play out that's as old as civilization itself?
Well, to answer that, the analysis we're looking at goes way back, all the way back to the Roman Empire. And it draws this direct and honestly kind of spooky parallel to our own time. The themes are just eerily similar. You see this slow erosion of civic virtue. And what replaces it? An obsession with private luxury, creating these little spaces that operate beyond the law. Back then, it was a Roman villa. Today, maybe it's a private island.
Yeah, so let's break down that Roman pattern. It all starts with the elite losing their sense of discipline and accountability. But the really dangerous part? It's the self-deception that comes next, that belief that we are too big to fail. That's the fatal moment when a civilization's leaders convince themselves that the rules are for other people, because that's the moment they leave the gates wide open.
Okay, so if that's the diagnosis of the problem, what's the proposed solution? Well, the source puts forward a pretty radical idea, a return to a strict code of conduct it calls the new chivalry. And let's be clear, this isn't about knights in shining armor or some romantic fantasy. No, it's presented as a cold, hard, strategic necessity for survival. The whole point is to forge leaders who are, by their very design, completely immune to blackmail.
And to really hammer this point home, the analysis uses this great, stark analogy from the movie Sin City. On one side, you've got Senator Rauch. He's the untouchable elite. He uses all his power to hide this unbelievable depravity. To him, he is the law. He's the embodiment of that elite corruption. And then on the other side, you have Detective Hartigan. He's just an old cop, but he lives by this simple, unbreakable code. Protect the innocent, no matter what it costs him. He sacrifices literally everything for that duty. That contrast, right there, is the essence of this new chivalry idea.
And Hartigan's final line in that movie, it's just a perfect metaphor for this whole concept. He says, "An old man dies, a little girl lives." The point being made here is that the old, corrupt, compromised systems, they have to be sacrificed. They have to be allowed to die so that the future, the little girl, can survive. It's a brutal calculation. But the argument is that no single reputation can ever be more important than the integrity of the whole system.
So this all brings us to a final, incredibly urgent choice. When a society is forced to look into a mirror this revealing, this ugly, it really only has two options. It can either cleanse itself, or it can collapse under the sheer weight of what it sees in the reflection. But there's a huge danger in this moment of truth, because our adversaries, they know this too. And they use these kinds of revelations not to bring about justice, but to create a spectacle of cynicism. Their goal is to flood the zone and push this narrative that, see, everyone is corrupt, so nothing really matters. And they do that because they're hoping to paralyze us with apathy and get us fighting with each other.
And that leaves you, with a central dilemma, right? Do we try to just shatter the mirror because we can't stand the ugly reflection? Do we choose that short-term comfort, even if it means long-term decay? Or do we find the courage to actually learn from what we see, no matter how painful it is, and begin the incredibly difficult work of rebuilding?
And that brings us to one last, really sobering thought to leave you with. The physical collapse of a civilization, the ruins of its cities, that's only the second death. The first death, the one that really matters, happens silently. It happens in the minds of the elites, at the exact moment they decide that the rules no longer apply to them, because that is the moment the keys to the city are quietly handed over.